All right, guys. So, look, today we're talking about how to fire without sacrificing your lifestyle. Look, the fire movement is awesome. I think it's a thing. It's a bit of a juggernaut. There's a ton of people, sparked a lot of interest, and with very good reason. Um, can be some issues with fire. And the main one is sort of around the theme of this particular webinar is that I've seen people that they get so obsessed with this stuff that they end up like, for me, I think when it comes to money, like you want to get to the destination, but you got to enjoy the journey as well. And that is all possible. I've seen people go a little bit extreme, and it's like they're really drastically cut back their sacrifices, their lifestyle today, and make all these sacrifices just so that they can retire at 37, which is sort of good. But if you retire at 39 and you get to enjoy yourself a bit more along the way, that's probably a good thing too. So what I want to go through today is help you understand the key things to think about when it comes to fire, how you can set it up in the right way to get you to where you want to be when you want to get there, but enjoy yourself along the way. Firstly, just want to say a big shout out to our event partner Imperla for this. If you've been living under a rock and you're not across what Perla are about, then you definitely should be, because they're up to some awesome stuff. And big shout out to them for collaborating with us today. For anyone that's new to our content, and I can see a bunch of familiar names online, which is great to see, but for anyone that's might be here for the first time, we do a ton of content in a heap of different areas. There are a heap of events like this. So we've got our events scheduled until the end of the year, which you can check out on Eventbrite, which you should be familiar with because it's how you registered for this event. Also, the bunch of tools on the Pivot Wealth website or on our socials or the Mo Money podcast. So get around that. And a subtle, not subtle plug for my new book, just released a few months back, Replace Your Salary by Investing. I do dive a fair bit deeper into the stuff that we're going to cover off today. So if you want to start to finish game plan on the tactics that you can use around this stuff, that is, in places that sell books. Also, just for the lawyers, guys, please don't rush out and make any life-changing decisions off the back of what we cover. I was never here, this never happened, etc. Please seek out personalized advice before taking action. Dario says that he enjoyed the book. So nice one, Dario. Hope it helped, mate. Very good. All right. So guys, look, I get, everyone's situation's unique. We're all snowflakes, but ultimately there are some common challenges that hold people back when it comes to this fire stuff and their money more broadly. Three big ones are information overload. It's like so much information, especially around fire, like so many ways that you can do it. It's like you're drinking from the fire hose. People struggle to find balance between getting ahead and living a good lifestyle. That's why we're having this conversation today. And the third one is, everyone's heard of FOMO, and no doubt there's a bit of that when it comes to your money. But FOFU, that's basically the fear of effing it up, the fear of making a mistake that costs you a bunch of money. No one wants to do the dumb thing that they later regret. So what happens for a lot of people is that they end up stuck, and often not stuck doing nothing, but just stuck doing whatever it was that they've been doing in the past. And what that often means is they're missing the opportunity to be getting more out of what they've already got today. So what we've found is that there are three areas that you need to get right. I'm going to touch on each of these three areas as we go through today, but give you the fire context around it. Structure, making it easy to save and manage your money, and making it clear how much money you need to spend, but how much money you've got to work with when it comes to investing. That's the second piece, is strategy, and that's understanding what you can do to actually get ahead, buy shares, buy property, buy crypto, buy Cranky Super, what that actually looks like. And then the third is the solutions, the investments that you use to actually back up your strategy. So here you want to make sure that you're getting reliable, consistent progress over time and avoiding the downsides and setbacks and those big momentum killing mistakes. I've got an example to share with you guys at the start here. Talks about shows you how you don't need to invest a lot to create a pretty significant amount of wealth, but you do have to avoid blowing up your cash, choosing bad investments that then suffer setbacks when you then have to go back to the starting line. So what I've found is that if any one of these three elements is missing, it will end up dragging down everything else. So it doesn't matter how good you're doing in two of the areas. If the third one is missing, then you're always going to fall short of the results that you could or should be getting. So if you don't have a good structure in place, it's like you're working with a leaky bucket. It's almost pretty much impossible to make good decisions. If you don't have a good strategy, you're leaving a heap of money on the table. And if you don't have good investments, well, you blow up your cash, and that's a disaster. So Look, before I get into the tactics, I wanted to talk about the different stages that I see people go through when it comes to their money. Partly, in line with the FIRE journey, but I suppose a little bit more broadly as well. Because what we've found is that there's ultimately there are 4 clear stages that people go through with their money, and what defines what stage that you're at is 3 things. Firstly, how quickly you're getting ahead with your money. Second, how you feel about your money. And third is your ability to live the lifestyle that you want. So it is a progression, and I'll talk about how you can progress through the stages. But the first stage that we see people in is the distress stage. And for people in this distress stage, that's where they're not getting ahead at all financially. In some cases, they're even going. Understandably, they're stressed out and they're trapped from a lifestyle perspective because they've got no money to make the personal or lifestyle choices that they want. Now, what we've found, and I'm sure that the reason that you guys are here means that this is not an issue, but what we've found is that you can't actually get out of this distress stage without making a clear commitment to your money, because money is one of these things that it is really important, but it's never really urgent. So it's easy for it to get put on your to-do list for this tomorrow that never seems to come around. The second stage that I see people in is the stalled stage. And that's where people are making some progress getting ahead with their money, but it's slow and slower than they want it to be. From a peace of mind point of view, they're not fully stressed out, but there's just this like niggling thought in the back of their mind that there's something more that they're missing out on, that they should be getting more. And from a lifestyle perspective, they're able to make some of the personal or lifestyle choices that they want, but it often comes at the sacrifice of getting ahead financially at the rate that they want. The next stage that we see people in is comfortable. For people at this stage, this is where you're now starting to build some good momentum from a financial perspective. You're finding a good balance between getting ahead with your money and living a good lifestyle, and you're building a really solid level of confidence around your money. The fourth stage is what I very technically labeled the killing it stage. And for people at this stage, this is where you're now getting rapid acceleration from a financial perspective, feeling completely carefree, and there's no limits on the lifestyle or personal choices that you can make. So look, I'm not going to ask anyone to volunteer, but hopefully, some of you guys are connecting with some of those stages and seeing, what's the layers up and up, because it is a progression. And there are some key things that you can do to get through these stages and get through them faster. Now, the first one is making a commitment to get into the stalled stage. From there, if you want to get into the top 2 stages, the comfortable and killing it, you got to take action. It's pretty simple. It's like action is what's going to give you results. Taking action to open the savings account, start investing more, buy that property, focus on your next step. That's what's going to start driving results. But these days, the world is moving so quickly that it's not enough to just do stuff once. There's no set and forget money strategy. So you've got to take action, but you've got to do that on an ongoing basis. So you continue to make the most out of the money that you have. So it's ongoing action is key here. Now, if you want to put yourself in the best position possible, you got to maximize every opportunity. And this is where a lot of dollars get left on the table by a lot of people, because money these days, like, tax, we've got different savings accounts, investment accounts, superannuation, all these different options. If you squeeze every bit of juice out of all of those different elements, that is what starts to give you that really rapid acceleration and serious traction. A pro tip for you guys that if you start maximizing every opportunity earlier on, even if you're down in the stalled stage, that's going to really accelerate how quickly you start making progress. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what you can do and what you can do next. Now, I'm going to get into the basics, but I can see there's actually a bunch of questions that have come through. So thank you guys for jumping in early. What is the right split to build a good ETF portfolio, growth versus growth and defensive? That's a really great question. And I'll get into this in a bit more detail in this next section. But I think when it comes, for me personally, when it comes to, if I'm investing money to grow my wealth for the future, I want to be invested entirely in shares. I am not interested in bond investments or defensive investments like that. Like, that's just not for me. If I was retired and I wanted to live on, an annuity income, and that was where I was at, I may consider it more. Although a lot of people that are very wealthy, have very low levels of defensive investments, because once you've got heaps of shares, that it doesn't really matter how much the share market is moving up and down, that your dividend checks keep coming in. And so that gives you your own stability. So I will caveat that response by saying that I think that having access to cash and a solid emergency fund is absolutely critical to everybody. So while when I invest, I want to invest into shares and growth investments that are going to grow from the future, as opposed to defensive investments that won't grow but will give me stability and a nice income, I want to make sure that I've got a good amount of cash that I know that I'm going to have more than enough to fall back on if something goes wrong. So I hope that helps. Another question here from Human says, what is the best way to invest currently considering low AUD rate so we can have some exposure to undervalued currency, i.e. investing in big Australian companies which are active internationally? Yeah, look, it's another great question. And the Aussie dollar is just is killing me at the moment. There are investments that give you some exposure to that. There are a couple of ETFs, without getting into specifics, that basically make you money when the Aussie dollar strengthens against the US dollar. They are very volatile though, and not for the faint of heart, certainly not for inexperienced investors. And there's a strong argument that they're not for experienced investors either. But I think exactly what you put there, where if you're investing into Australian companies that have revenue generated overseas, then that can be advantageous. Although a lot of these bigger companies do hedge out their currency exposures as well. So I don't know that there's a perfect solution there. Unfortunately. Hopeful that the Aussie dollar gets into a little bit more of an even keel in the medium term. Investing though into currency hedged ETFs can be one way to do it though, where you're basically the dollar exposure is pegged, so it doesn't matter, because the risk with investing at the moment, if you're investing into US say denominated shares, if the Australian dollar starts strengthening, then the value of your investments go down. But even if the value is in nominal terms is going up. So if you're investing with a currency hedge, and there are a lot of good, like international share index funds and other international funds that will peg your currency exposure, meaning that you just get the benefit of the actual share movement and the currency gets taken out of the picture. So that's probably something to think about as well. Hope that helps, Human. All right. Let me see. I've got. I can see some questions coming through in the chat. Once again, I'm going to keep an eye on the chat, but just if you really want to make sure that your question doesn't get missed, pop that into the Q&A instead of the chat. For shares and property, I can see I can leverage LVR with property without a margin call, but for shares, it's harder. Do you think gearing ETF can help? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I love geared ETFs. Again, not for the faint of heart. Definitely, got more volatility, but buying an ETF that has leverage inside it over the long term, you'd expect to do more. So that helps. And yeah, margin lending, I am not a fan of at all, because of exactly what you put in there in margin calls. Guys, I'm going to crack on. I can see a bunch more questions. Keep those rolling in. But I am keen to get into this, which is where we're going to cover the basics of FIRE and how you should be thinking about this stuff and framing it up. Now, the first thing that I wanted to cover, a bit of an example to set the scene, talking about how to replace your salary with investment income. I started thinking about this a fair bit when I was writing my book, Replace Your Salary by Investing. You can see someone asking that question, and thank you, Dario, for popping that into the chat. I see success as an investor, and success in FIRE as well, is that ultimately you want to build investments to replace your income so that you've got enough investments to give you your ideal level of income without you being forced to work. Now, at that point, if you choose to work, that's a choice, and that's different to needing to work because you have to, because you don't have enough money to not work. So I started thinking about, well, what do you need to do to get there? So in Australia, the average income is $92,000. Now, that is the average. It's not the median. The median income is about $62,000, but the average income across the country is 92 grand. If you wanted to get $92,000 a year of income from investments, you would need to have about $1.84 million in investments to get there. That uses the 5% rule. So for anyone playing along at home, if you want to think about, FIRE or being financially independent, having a target level of income, you basically divide, if you're not already across this, if you divide the number by 5%, that is going to tell you how much money you need to have in wealth to get there. So therefore, if you want to have an income of $50,000 a year, you need to have a wealth of about $1 million. If you want an income of $100,000 a year, you need to have wealth of about $2 million, et cetera, et cetera. So $92,000, you need 1.84 mil. That's based on the 30-year return of the Australian share market, which is 9.8%. It's slightly higher in the US, but broadly around the same. And then you take off an amount for inflation, taxes, fees, and income, essentially internal, to get you to the 5% number. Now, how much you need to save and invest to build that income of $92,000? Well, it depends on when you get started. So if you're 20 years old today, that you need to save and invest $10.10 a day to build $1.84 million by age 60. If you're 30 years old, you need to save $27.72 a day. If you're 40, $81 a day. If you're 50, $296 a day. So you see that, $10 a day, that's something. I get that we're in a cost of living crisis and an interest rate crisis and an inflation crisis and a rental crisis to add on to the top. But $10 is something that should be achievable for most people. $27 a day, that's like $210 a week. It's sort of getting a bit harder, but probably still achievable. $80 a day, you're now almost $600 a week. That's getting harder. And $296 a day, that's like $2,000 a week. Most people don't earn that, let alone have the ability to save that. So you see that the longer you leave it, you need to do a ton more to end up in exactly the same position. So the flip side of that is that the sooner you get started, the less you need to do, the less you need to sacrifice, and the easier it is to get there. So I just wanted to put that there as a frame up for, what comes next when we think about how you actually FIRE. Because ultimately, I do a lot of these talks. People get all pumped up, they nod their heads along. They think, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do this. I'll do that investing thing. I'll get rid of that bit of credit card debt. But then life gets in the way, and then they're treading water and just don't get those results. So you have to get started. Action is the key to results. Now, if you're looking to invest, there's really three main things areas that you can invest into. I've kept super out of this on purpose because super is essentially just a vehicle that invests into shares, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about super. But essentially, I didn't put on here saving money in cash because I think everyone understands that as well. But buying shares, managed funds, ETFs, or micro investing, I put them all in the same bucket. You can buy property, or you can invest into crypto and startups. And I know that those are two very different sort of investments, but I put them both into the higher risk, higher potential reward type, more speculative investment bucket. So getting into each of them. Now, share investing, and again, when I talk about shares, I'm talking about shares, ETFs, micro investing, managed funds. I put them all in the same bucket. Share investing is great because it allows you to start small, particularly with micro investing accounts that are out there that you can start investing with as little as $5. Some of them allow you to start with 1 single cent. So anyone can get started. The returns are better than cash long-term. Long-term return on cash, 4.4%. Long-term return on shares, 9.8%. You see that you're way better off by investing in shares rather than cash over time. The real return on cash, side note, but sort of related, is negative now and most of the time after you account for inflation and taxes as well. Share investing is also very flexible in that if you do your budget or you do a bit of a savings plan and you think, I've got $50 a week that I can afford to invest today, you can do that this week. If something was to change next week, that you can change. You just don't invest that $50, no problem. It's not like if you've got a mortgage payment, a mortgage, you need to make that mortgage payment month on month on month. Like that just has to happen. That's very inflexible. It's an inflexible way to invest. Whereas with shares, you've got more flexibility in there. Shares are also very good for income. If you had an equivalent, like if you had $1 million in shares, that would give you an income, income purely, not growth return, but an income return of $50,000 to $60,000 a year. If you had $1 million in property that was fully paid off, that would give you an income return of $25,000 to $30,000 a year. So basically, the income return on shares is about double what it is in property. And you get solid growth on shares if you choose good ones and you're consistent over time. Now, that all being said, property does tend to win over shares when it comes to building your wealth, building your assets and wealth for the future. The reason that property wins is because when you buy a property, it's not like you save up $1 million and go buy $1 million property. Instead, you save up $100,000, $200,000. You use that as a deposit, go and take some of the bank's money, and then you invest it all together. And then you got this much bigger asset and investment that's working for you. So that means if your aim is to build your investments and build your wealth, property is going to win over shares. I've already said that shares will win over property when it comes to generating income from your investments. So, it's a double-edged sword, and I've got this on a future slide to talk about. It's an important distinction for you to understand when you're thinking about FIRE and how to get there. When you invest in property, there is a real cash flow impact that you need to be aware of. You need to be making those mortgage payments month on month on month. So you can't just opt out of that, unfortunately, or fortunately, I suppose, depending on how you look at it. So that's an important consideration, and particularly when it comes to planning, which I'm going to explain, but you need to be really aware of that. And therefore, your risk management around property investing is really crucial. Now, crypto and startups, I put these in because they get a lot of attention. You can't ignore this space at the moment. And look, my personal view is I think it's really interesting. Personally, I got a little bit of crypto in my portfolio. It's a small percentage of my overall portfolio. Similarly with startups, well, I run businesses, so I'm invested in startups through that. But if I wasn't, I might have a small portion invested into startups as well. But a lot of people, they get drawn into this because people want to, like, the idea of making a whole bunch of money in a short amount of time is really, really attractive. Let's not kid ourselves. But it comes with an extra level of risk. And the statistics show that you're much more likely to get average or below average results or completely blow up your cash than you are to get those phenomenal results that most people go into these sorts of investments thinking about. So that's the thing. Also, I think a thing that a lot of people lose sight of when they're investing in these more speculative, higher risk, higher potential return investments is that I just showed you guys an example showing that if you save and invest $10 a day from 20 to 60, you're going to be a multimillionaire. You don't need that extra level of risk. Like, the long-term return on shares is almost 10% a year. Maybe with crypto it'll be slightly higher, but you also may suffer massive setbacks in the meantime. So you've got to think about how much risk you actually need when you invest. Now, how it actually works, the steps that you need to go through. The first thing is that, like, if you're starting from a blank slate, the first thing that you want to do is understand your saving and spending plan. Now, I've got this is how I run my own bank accounts. It's how we do it with a lot of our clients as well. Essentially showing you, the nuts and bolts of how this works. But essentially, when you're allocating your money, you can choose to spend it today or you can spend it in the future. Your future spending is your savings and investments. Now, when you invest, there's a limited number of things you can do. Like I said, you got shares, property, crypto, or startups, like speculative investments. Then you can save money in cash, you can pay down debt, or you can crank your super fund. Saving money in cash and paying down debt are two important things, but they're also two things that are never, ever going to get you rich. It's really buying shares, buying property, cranking your superannuation, potentially investing into more risky investments. They're the things that can really grow your wealth for the future, but they're also the things that go up and down more. So if you want to get good results in those areas, there are two things you need to do. First, you need to choose good investments. I'm going to talk about how you do that. Second, you need to make sure you're never forced to sell those investments. So how you do that is you just need to make sure that all the spending that you want to do is provided for. When you do that, if you've got enough money to cover all of the expenses that you want or need to incur, then you know that all of the other money you can invest for the long term. You can invest for your financial independence and early retirement. So the first step is understanding, well, how much money do you want or need to be spending and how much is left over for saving? And then you've got to make sure that you're happy with that balance. I'll talk about how you know if what you're saving is enough. But what this gives you when it comes to FIRE is that you've got the spending that you covered that you want to do today, and you know exactly how much that you've got available for saving and investing. Now, why that's important is because how much you've got available for savings is what will dictate what investments actually make sense. You know, do shares make the most sense? Is property an option? Is superannuation, et cetera, et cetera? Also, knowing how much you need to spend is what's going to set your FIRE target. So, if you know that your spending level or your target spending level is $50,000 a year, then you know that your target wealth level should be $1 million to give you that $50,000 a year. $1 million in investments give you $50,000 a year in income. That's going to cover all the spending that you want to do. Also, when you're good at saving and good at spending, good at saving and spending, finding that balance, that will get you there faster. And importantly, so importantly for people that are involved in the FIRE movement, is that when you've got a good savings plan, a good spending plan, it will eliminate guilty spending, because it's really easy. And we speak to a lot of people that it's like they might be really good at saving, but they feel really guilty when they spend. So if you've got a system where you know all of the spending that you want to do is provided for, and you're saving enough to get you to where you want to be, then you should be spending guilt-free. And that's a good thing. That's a very good thing that everyone should have. So if you want to FIRE, you want to invest to build your momentum. Leverage just means borrowing to invest. That wins from a wealth building perspective though. So it's going to accelerate things. Equity release. So when you buy a property and it goes up in value, and then the banks lend you money against the increase in value of that property, that's the closest thing to a free ride you're going to get when it comes to investing. Because basically the bank will just give you money that you can then go and invest into investments that will give you a return that's more than what they're going to charge you on the money, meaning that you further accelerate your wealth building. So there's risk that is important to manage there, but that's a golden ticket. Shares do win for income though. So I'm not saying that you should go out and buy 10 properties. In fact, I'm probably saying for most people, you shouldn't go out and buy 10 properties. But you need to be aware that shares do win from an income perspective. Now, what that means, if you step back and think about all of those elements, that buying shares is great, buying shares is good from an income perspective, but property is good for building your wealth. That means that if you're thinking about FIRE and you're trying to do it in the smartest way possible, and you don't want to sacrifice too much in terms of your lifestyle along the way, it means that your investing strategy will transition. And I talk about this in my book, where it's like your first aim is that you want to build enough wealth to give you the income that you want for the future. But the strategy that gets you there, the strategy that gets you to building your target level of wealth the soonest, is not the same strategy that will give you the best income outcome moving forward. So what that means is that you're probably going to have stages where you go, one stage is building the wealth, and then you need to restructure your investments so that your focus is then on delivering you the ideal level of income. So you've got to be considered with your approach there. Now, how you do that, you need to be planning. You need to plan at the front end, and you need to be constantly planning throughout the journey so that you can know when you need to transition things, how well you're going, et cetera, et cetera. How you do that, this is the planning process that we use at Pivot, but it's the same process that basically anyone should be using if they want to create a robust plan around their money. First thing, focus in. What's important? What's the goals? What's the targets? Then you want to clarify all of the moving parts, the things that you've got to work with. Importantly, what money do you have coming in terms of your income? What money do you have going out in terms of the expenses that you need? And then how is that going to change over the next little while? Because you've got your today picture, but 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 3 years from now, things could be a bit different, particularly for younger people, particularly when you're thinking about kids and families in the mix, that there will be changes that happen around income, around your expenses. So you got to put those into your baseline. And the other thing that you want to put, if you want to FIRE without sacrificing your lifestyle, you got to put all of your key lifestyle wants into that baseline as well. That is the baseline upon which you could then start looking at, well, if we buy shares, this is what the financial outcomes are going to be. This is what how it's going to feel, et cetera. If we buy property, this is how it fits, et cetera. And then you can layer the different decisions, look at the different strategies, and choose the one that you're comfortable is going to get you to where you want to be, but that you've got the confidence to execute on. Then you want to go action plan. What are the steps that need to happen to turn the plan into the outcomes? Automate as much as you possibly can so that you can get out of the way and let your money do what you want it to do. And then it's about executing and refining. But this is setting up the initial plan. You then need to, this is where you actually make the money, where you execute on the plan and start getting the results. But you have to reset your targets. You want to go through this at least once a year again, reset the targets, reset the strategy, and keep things moving forward. And that's how you keep those steps happening towards ultimately firing. When it comes to money and your plan and what is the best plan for you, you want to balance the numbers against the emotion and against the risk. Now, I know for sure for every single one of you guys listening in today, every single one without any exception, that the strategy that will make you the absolute most money, that will help you to build wealth the fastest, is very, very simple. What you need to do is you need to go to the bank, borrow as much money as they will lend you, and then go and load up into investment properties. Choose good ones so that they grow. And then as soon as you've got enough equity or enough savings or enough equity and savings to buy the next one, you buy the next one and the next one and the next one. And you keep going. And that is the strategy for every single person that will allow you to build wealth the fastest. I also know that is the strategy that is not going to be the best strategy for most people, if not all people on this call as well. The reason that it's not is because if you load up into debt in the most aggressive way possible, you're not going to be able to sleep at night. You're not going to be able to enjoy your lifestyle. You're going to be facing more risk than you want, and you're certainly going to be facing more risk than you actually need. I know, though, that if you have no debt at all, and this is another criticism of the FIRE movement, that some people are so extreme on this that they're like, you should only buy shares and you should never buy property and you never use debt and debt is the devil and blah, 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 blah. But if you do that, you're probably leaving a ton of money on the table. And that's what I would call, in my opinion, a lazy strategy. There's a very small number of people where that is the right strategy for, but that number is incredibly small. So if we think about it, that you've got extreme debt is the best from a numbers perspective, but probably not ideal. No debt is lazy. That the right strategy for every one of you guys is going to be somewhere in the middle. And that's where the good plan comes in, that you've got to balance the numbers against the emotion so that you can find the sweet spot for you where you're not sacrificing your lifestyle, where you're not being lazy, but you're not also taking on excessive risk where you can't sleep at night or you're facing more risk than you need. Prioritization there is crucial. Prioritization of your lifestyle goals, prioritization of your investment goals, prioritization of your FIRE timelines as well. And I will just say with this, when it comes to your planning around your money and how you manage your money, I love this quote from James Clear. For anyone that's seen it, a few of our talks, you may have seen this one before. It says, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And so it's not about setting awesome goals. Like, anyone can say that they set awesome goals around their money, but you've got to have a system around how you plan with your money and how you manage your money that's going to translate those goals into results, into better habits, into consistent action, and ultimately into the outcomes that you want. I'm just going to do this one piece, then I can see that there's a ton of questions coming through and I'm going to crack into these. So I wanted to talk about clarity and getting from where you are to future state with your money. Now, I normally put this towards the end of the talks because I think it's an important one, but I feel like it fits quite neatly in here when you think about whether what I want to give you is, how do you know if you're saving and investing enough to get you to where you want to be? Now, if you think about future state when it comes to your money, you're going to be somewhere in the spectrum of you're either going to be crushing it with your money or doing really poorly, or probably you're going to be somewhere in between. Now, because of the compounding impact of time and money, it's not like a straight line journey to these points. It's actually a curve. So if you're not 100% on track to end up exactly where you want to be with your money, you need to do some stuff and jump the line, save a little bit more, invest a little bit more, be a bit smarter with your tax, ditch out that bit of debt, etc., whatever. And then you just need to take the next step and the next step and the next step and follow the path, because you're on the path. The longer you leave it, the more sacrifice you need to make. The jumping line piece becomes more and more painful, and putting yourself in the best position can become impossible. You see this when I talk about if you're starting at 50 and you want to retire at 60, you need to be saving $2,000 a week. It's going to be pretty hard. You're probably going to have to compromise. But why I put this in here is that the clarity is all important, because I talk to so many people about their money and they just have no real idea where they're actually headed. So the first step when you're planning, you need to know, if you keep doing exactly what you're doing today, where are you going to end up? Is it going to be here? And if so, great. If it's up here, you go, well, I should be enjoying my lifestyle a bit more. If it's down here, then you need to think about, well, what am I going to change to put myself on track? But if you don't know, then you don't know that you need to change. And if you don't change, particularly if you're falling short, if you're going overs, there's probably less of a problem. But if you're going unders, it's like every week or month that goes past, there's an opportunity cost there that you can never get back. So yeah, you've got to know, you've got to set targets, and you've got to set targets and know where you're headed to if you want to fire and do it the smart way. All right. So there's a ton of questions, and thanks again, guys, for all these questions coming through. First one, it says, investment bonds good in a personal name or in a trust? I think they're good in both. I'm going to talk a little bit about investment bonds in the next piece. I'm going to dive deep into tax. So I might park that one a little bit, but yeah, definitely good in both. Is it good to contribute to partner super for tax benefits? Yeah, I think you're talking about the spouse contribution, which is like if your partner's got a low or no income, that if you put up to $3,000 into their super, you get up to $540 tax benefit. It's like a 17% return on the money from the tax saving immediately. So if you meet that criteria, and so long as you got the money there, that can be a really smart idea to do that, because the return is immediate and significant from a percentage perspective. It's only $3,000, which is not nothing, but it's also not earth shattering. But this, it's essentially 17% immediate return from doing that. Dave says, when buying a 2-unit house, is it considered owner-occupier if living in one of the units? That's a great question. Not sure. I think you need to defer to an accountant on that one. I'm not an accountant, but I believe, actually under one title, I'm not sure, to be honest. I know with a duplex, if you're living in one property of two and it's clearly defined and you can see it separately, that it would, that the one that you're living in is owner occupied and therefore CGT free. The other one is investment and therefore CGT applicable. Under one title, yeah, I haven't come across that one. Sorry, Dave. So check with your friendly neighborhood accountant on that one. Is salary sacrifice via super a good option? It's a fantastic option. The only downside is that your money is trapped in your super until you're old. So you only want to do it with money that you don't need until you're old. But it is awesome from you saving money, tax deductions on the way in, lower tax environment once it's in there. So yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Will it affect my borrowing capacity when buying an investment property? I think that's also from Lerner, following on from the super one. I think, again, I'm not a mortgage broker, so it's probably best to speak to a mortgage broker. But my understanding is that if you can demonstrate that you're making voluntary super contributions, that the banks will count that towards how much money you can use to fund your mortgage payment. So I don't think it's at a disadvantage. Don't quote me on that. Please go and check with a mortgage broker, but that is my understanding. Pros and cons to having houses in a trust from Kevin. Pros, yes, I'm going to talk about trusts and tax in a sec, but pros are streaming income. Cons are land tax and negative gearing benefits being trapped inside the trust. Question, what are your thoughts on NAB Equity Builder as a principal and interest loan for ETF share investing, if not someone that's particularly interested in owning an investment property? I think that product can be good. I think I'd wanted to look at the interest rates. Obviously, this is not financial advice. Please go and seek out personalized financial advice before taking any action. But I have used that product in the past for clients, found it to be quite good then. Something like that. So NAB Equity Builder, it's sort of like a mortgage for investing in shares, essentially, where they'll lend you, depending on the shares that you're buying or the ETFs that you're buying, that they will lend you an amount of money at a certain loan to value ratio against the shares. But different to margin loans, there are no margin calls, which is one of I think the really attractive features of this particular product. I would want to be careful though at the moment, because I know that before the interest rates were like 4 or 5%, but now with interest rates being way higher, you probably just need to be aware that the long-term expected return on the share market is 9%, 9.8%. So if you're paying 9% for your debt, then your expected return is like really very small, and you're taking on all of the extra risk for doing that. So yeah, I would just look at those interest rates and be careful with that one. What shares can I buy at the moment that are doing well? Been losing a bit of cash on investments. Yeah, that's the $1 million question, I suppose. But am I going to get into this on the slide? Look, personally, it depends on your investment philosophy as to what you want to buy. You can chase the companies that are doing well, but as we've seen, this year tech, we're seeing a big tech recovery. Last year resources were massive. The year before tech sucked. So that tends to chop and change over time. So I think if you're choosing good investments, you probably want to think about what is going to be good investments year on year on year, and try to avoid chopping and changing what you're investing into as much as possible. That's one of the reasons that I like index fund investments, because you know that they, more than 80% of the time, more than 90% of the time, in some cases, they're doing better than all of the other funds. And you know that the biggest companies will perform best over the long term. So, that can give you consistency, and it's a really easy way to invest as well, instead of trying to crunch, data and spreadsheets and looking at ultimately what's best. So, if you need a starting point, that can be something that could be quite good to look at, Kim. I hope you find that helpful. If we're going to invest in ETS, is it similar to just put extra money into our super? Yes, it is. Yeah, it's pretty similar, depending on your super fund and how it's invested. But you could have a super fund where it's going to be exactly the same in terms of what you're investing into. What will be different, though, is the fact that when you put money into your super via salary sacrifice, you get a tax deduction for putting that money in. And then once it's inside super, it's taxed at a maximum rate of 15%, which is way lower than your marginal tax rate. So that's the investments are the same, but the outcomes will be different because the tax rates are different as well. Guys, I am loving all these questions, and I can see that there's heaps coming through, which is good. I'm just going to take a couple more, and then I'm going to crack on because I'm a little bit mindful of the clock here. I've already invested in property as a main source of wealth building. Should I consider shares, ETFs to outside of super? Yes, you definitely should consider that, in my opinion. I think property is a great way to build your wealth and using leverage. But like I said, you're probably not going to want to push your borrowing as much as possible. So, typical journey is save a bit of money in cash until you can, or do some investing, or both, until you can buy a property. Then you probably don't want to pay down that debt if it's an investment debt. So, then you need to look at, well, when could you buy your next property if that is your next step? Then if that's a while away, you probably think about investing into shares. Then it will reach a point where you go, I've got enough property. And then, again, you probably don't want to be paying down the debt in the short term while you're still looking to really grow and build your wealth. So then investing into shares is a great thing to do. Hope that helps. I'm just going to take one more, and then I'm going to crack on. Is it better to keep savings in an offset account against my PPOR, or to invest in shares? I feel it's increasing my offset reduced non-tax deductible loan. Look, I get that a lot of people at the moment are saving money in cash and putting it in offsets because they think that that's the least risky thing that they can do. But reality is, what we've got, it is saving you 5 or 6% in your mortgage, but with inflation running hot, it's really not growing for you. That money is not growing. So if you're investing instead into growth investments, which are keeping up with inflation more, like last year, share market did 13%. You're way better off, and downturns make millionaires. So it's actually, saving in cash can be one of the most risky things that you can do, but most people don't realize that, because the opportunity cost is real. Say you got 100 grand and you considering, do I invest it or do I put it in my offset? If you invest it, maybe you make an extra $5,000 in the next 12 months. Now, the cost of not investing it is not just the $5,000 that you miss out on, because once you make that $5,000, you reinvest that, and it's going to grow for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So it's how much that $5,000 would grow to over the next 30 years, which is probably going to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's why people don't think about it and go, oh yeah, it's only a couple of percent, or it's only 5%, but it's what that money will then grow, every year forever. And it obviously compounds as well. So I think the caveat to that is you definitely want to have a rock solid emergency fund, particularly at the moment. But once you're clear on that, then if you've got surplus savings that is earmarked for investing, then you probably want to think about investing it. All right, guys, I'm going to crack on and I'm going to keep those questions coming through. I'm going to jump back into the questions. Now, with all this stuff, I've already said this one, action is the key to results. Confidence is the key to taking action, though. So you have to be confident if you want to take action. Otherwise, you're going to be too scared to actually do anything. And building your knowledge is the key to confidence. And that's why that planning process works, to get clear on what you need to do, but then level up your knowledge to build the confidence to take the action to get the results. Now, tax is the biggest opportunity and the biggest potential roadblock. Tax is my favorite lever to help people get ahead faster. The reason that it is because it's the only way that you can get ahead faster without sacrificing anything that's important to you today. Like, you can get, if you save more money, you can get ahead faster, but you have to say no to stuff today. Whereas saving on tax, it's just going to give you more money without having to say no to anything. When you invest, your after-tax return is the only return that matters. You only get one tax rate as well. And the tax rates are different for different entities. So these are the marginal tax rates in Australia. So you see that first 18 grand that you earn, you pay 0% tax. And then it goes all the way up to, once you earn more than $180,000, that your tax rate is 47%. Now, if you think that your goal as someone that's trying to be wealthy, that's trying to FIRE, is that you want to replace your salary with investment income. So by definition, you want to build an investment income, probably $50,000, maybe $100,000 a year. If you're still working, which you're going to need to be saving the money to actually get there, then you're going to have all of that taxable income adding onto your employment, the taxable investment income adding onto your employment income, and you are going to get pumped with tax. So you only get one tax rate. So one tax rate for all of your employment income, bonus income, commissions, overtime, and investment income, interest income on bank accounts, dividend income, rental income. So you need to be considered with how and where you own your investments if you want to optimize things. You can, when you invest, choosing who or where you own your investments is a really important driver of the tax outcomes. If you invest in your personal name, you'll pay tax at your personal marginal tax rate. You can invest, as we've touched on a couple of times already, through your super fund. That's going to be taxed at a maximum rate of 15%. Can be as low as 10% on capital gains if you've held them for longer than 12 months. You can also invest through a company or a trust in a company. Maximum tax rate of 30%. That can be pretty advantageous. And bonds have a maximum tax rate of 30% in income. I'm talking about investment bonds, not investing into corporate bonds. And I get that the distinction there is a little bit confusing. But an investment bond is like a tax structure, like a super fund, where you can invest into ETFs or any sort of investments. Maximum tax rate 30% and CGT free. So no capital gains tax if you hold the investments for 10 years or more. There are some rules to be aware of there as well. Trust is where you can, a trust needs to distribute its income to another tax-paying entity, which can be an individual. It can be an investment company as well. So you see that the tax rates are different. And to put it into perspective, like I've got an example here to show, if you've got investment income of $100,000 a year, if it's taxed at the top marginal tax rate, you're going to pay 47 Gs in tax. If it's taxed at 30%, which is the investment bond tax rate or the investment company tax rate, you're going to pay $30,000 in tax. That's $17,000 a year less tax that you're going to pay on that income, which is $17,000 more that you can reinvest to get ahead faster. If you got bigger goals, investment income, 200, 300, 400,000, you see that the annual tax savings is massive. So again, where you own your investments makes a huge difference to how quickly you get ahead and when you're actually can FIRE. To the question before about how you own things. Now, I get that this is not the prettiest output, but this is a tax optimization tool that we use at Pivot, where we look at investing in someone's personal name, through a trust, through a company, through an investment bond, or in joint names with a combination of these. And you see that this is a pretty basic example where we've got cranking the incomes, how much money are we putting in up front, how much are we putting in ongoing. And you maybe can't see this in full detail, but you see that the difference between some of the structures is in the tens of thousands of dollars. And this is for an investment of $3,600 a year. So it's really quite low. It makes a big difference. And that's why you want to be really smart when you're setting up your tax strategy, so that you get a higher after-tax return, so that you've got more money that you can reinvest to get ahead faster. All right. Bringing in to, on mistakes, a few things for you guys to look out for. Inconsistent saving and inconsistent investing can be a real throw a real spanner into your strategy and the results that you want. Trying to shoot the lights out with every investment that you make, it is our natural inclination, but it's also super risky and takes on way more risk than you need. Tax planning after you build wealth. Now, it's difficult and expensive to restructure your investments after they've built a critical mass. So you want to really, you want to make sure that you're smart about your tax planning before you get cracking hard so that you don't have to pay the piper too much more down the line. Not knowing your trajectory, I spoke about, and making choice in isolation is a big one where most common question I get asked as an advisor is, hey, I got 10 grand, what should I do with it? And it's the answer is always it depends, because sometimes saving in cash is the best thing, sometimes buying shares, sometimes paying down debt, sometimes buying property. It's the right decision for you. Really depends on how something fits in with your bigger picture. And look, trying to go it all alone, you know, we've seen from the variety of questions that have come through already on the chat today that you know, you need your money dream team in your corner: the mortgage broker, the accountant, advisor, property person, potentially, depending on you know what you're doing there. It's going to give you more confidence, take more action, get better outcomes, get ahead faster. And good advice will be a profit center, not a cost. It will make you more money than it costs you. All right, so I'll share this one with you. I must say I borrowed this framework from Alex Hormozi, who's a superstar if you're not across his stuff already. But he talks about how not to get wealthy. And I've given our spin on things for this. Now, I've seen this a lot in practice, that if you're working on a lot of different things at the same time, so you're spreading your attention really thin around your money and your strategy, that's one way to do it. Only ever focusing for short periods of time and then losing that focus and letting it slip. Never seeking out help. Making all of the mistakes yourself instead of learning from what other people are doing. You want to make all of those mistakes yourself, and then you want to repeat those mistakes again and again and not learn. Now, the definition of learning means that you change something. And I hope you guys have all learned something today, but learning means that you go and do something a little bit differently off the back of today. So it means making a change. Now, on the flip side of that, and there's a little bit tongue in cheek, but how you can build real wealth, focus on limited areas. So you limit your focus, pick an area and nail that area, then try and nail it as quickly as possible and move on to the next thing once it's solid. You want to work long-term, create habits around your money and systems around your money that allow you to be consistent over time. Get support and, you know, use the experts because they've got all the frameworks to help you get ahead faster. Learn from other people's mistakes. Don't repeat those mistakes, and then grow and refine your approach over time. Now, success when it comes to money is about choosing more than just choosing good investments, and it is a momentum game. Now, what I find that for a lot of people when it comes to their money, they get overwhelmed because they think, particularly when you're earlier on in the journey, they think that they need to know all of this stuff. You think about being wealthy and it's like you need to know tax stuff inside out and investing and all of these different things. If you're going to get really wealthy, you will learn all of that stuff over time, but you don't need to know all of that right now. All you need to know is enough to take the next step. Once you take that step, you're going to learn from that step. And then it's going to make taking the next step after that easier and clearer as well. Now, guys, I'm going to crack into the question. I think that's all the stuff that I had. Yeah. So I'll leave you with this one from Derek Sivers. It says, before I crack into the questions, says, if information was the answer, we'd all be billionaires with perfect abs. So I hope you guys have got some great ideas out of today. But, you know, if you want to get results, you need to take action. You need to make it happen. It will not happen on its own. Now, guys, like I said at the start, a ton of different content that we do. Also, this stuff is our jam. So if you want to chat to us about how we can help, we do these 10-minute focus chats where it's basically like, where are you at? What are you thinking? This is what the next steps could be. If we think we can help, we can talk about how. If not, we can point you in the right direction. I've just popped a link into the chat. 10 minutes, no obligation. We know that sometimes people just need a push in the right direction. But if you want to chat about that, feel free to book yourself a time. You can book directly, preferred time through our calendar there. Now, just while I'm doing that, while you're doing that, I'm going to answer some questions. And I can see a ton here again, guys. I'm loving all the questions coming through today. is this recorded? Can I watch this later if I need to be somewhere? Yes, it's on our YouTube now. So look up Ben Nash Pivot Wealth on YouTube. It'll be there. It's only there for a limited amount of time. So if you want to listen back to my jokes, get in quick because it will go, but it's up there for now. Any tips for tax-effective investments to look further into for high-income earners? Keep in mind Div 293. Div 293 is the high-income earners tax that it applies an extra 15% tax to your super fund. They structured that tax on purpose to make it really difficult to get around. So there's no real hacks for Div 293 because of the way that they've structured that rule. Now, basically, the Div 293 threshold kicks in at 250,000. But if you put in super contributions and stuff, it doesn't reduce your income for the purposes of that test. However, if you're not quite there yet, investing when you do your investing, if you do it in other entities, then that income does not add on to your assessable income, and it means that you will not get to that threshold as quickly or at all, depending on how you do that. So that's I think the big one. If your income's 400 grand a year, you probably just need to suck that one up, I'd say. When starting from nothing, is it better to buy shares individually when married or in a trust? Look, it depends on the numbers there. It's a good question, and I get that answer is vague, but it really depends, because if you're investing $1,000, then it may make more sense to just invest in your personal name. If you're investing $1 million, maybe it makes more sense to do it in a trust. Also depends on how your income levels are going to change over time, because particularly if you're planning a family and you know that one partner is going to be out of the workforce and have a lower taxable income for an extended period, then a trust can have more benefits, because with a trust, you stream the income through to them. So it really does depend. The more money you have, the more compelling a trust is going to be, and the less money you have, the less compelling a trust is going to be. You can also, with investment bonds, you can invest through an investment bond, and then you can transfer those investments into a trust without paying capital gains tax. This is not tax advice, by the way. You should definitely confirm all of this with an accountant. But that's a pretty cool strategy that we use a little bit, where you invest through a bond, don't have to worry about paying the money to set up a trust, and then you can transfer it into a trust in the future when that's appropriate. And then when the bond matures, or you reach that 10-year window, you take it out, it's in the trust, then you can stream it, more control as well. Happy days. Get that there was a lot of detail there, but I hope that helps, Ben. I am in my 20s and recently started investing in ETFs and shares. How to deal with FOMO for investing yearly, a little bit or more? How to deal with FOMO for investing yearly, a little bit or more at once? I'm not 100% following that question. I will just say, invest as much as you can without having to sacrifice your lifestyle. Also, maybe just give me some more clarity on what that one is about. Should you invest in single tech stocks individually like Apple, and also ETFs as VAS? Look, personally, I don't. I'm not an advocate for investing into individual companies. I think you get a lack of diversification around that. Some people love it though; it gives you more control. But I think all your eggs in one basket, no diversification, that could be risky. A lot of different ways to be right when it comes to investing, but when you think about like the stats that ETFs like the one you mentioned, VAS, the Vanguard Australian Share Index Fund or Index ETF, the stats show that they outperform the best of the best investment managers over time. So if you or I are trying to pick the companies that are going to perform the best, we're almost guaranteed to perform more poorly than the best investment managers in the world, and they can't compete with index funds over time. So that to me says that index funds are generally a pretty winning strategy. I hope that helps Pratik. Jesse, what tools do you use to automate the investing process, like apps to invest in shares? Yes, that's exactly it. Like our event partner for today, Pearler, they have an automatic investing feature, as do pretty much all of the micro investing apps, almost all of them. You basically set it up. You can have money debited coming out of your account every day, week, month, or whatever period works for you, or you can push it, but you can set it up automatically, which I really like. That can be a good way to do it. Guys, I am mindful of time. It is 1 o'clock. I understand if you need to bounce. I'm just going to crack on with a couple more of these questions, though, because I can see that there is a stack in here as well. Starting with my share portfolio, what's the best possible structure for long-term investments, investment bond trust company, keeping future tax benefits in mind? Yeah, look, that's an impossible question to answer. It can be answered, but it requires having a proper like financial plan and diving deep into the numbers. That's what a financial plan and arguably a financial planner is for. If you're really, really good with spreadsheets and you have a really solid understanding of tax, you could potentially build that yourself. Dario says, "G'day, Dario. Thanks for your banner in the chat today. What are your thoughts on investing in crowdfunding for startups like Birchal, for example?" Again, it can have a place if you're particularly interested in that. I would put it in the same bucket as the crypto and startup investing space. Where I see people go wrong with this stuff is that they go all in on that stuff at the start of their journey, and then most of the time it doesn't work the way that they want, and then they got these setbacks and having to go back to the start. So if you do that, then you're losing all of that momentum. Now, I forgot to say it, but I do normally say it when I put that slide up, is to say, if everyone lived their entire life and never invested one single dollar into cryptocurrency or startup investments, they're going to be completely fine. You're going to be fine. You definitely do not need to do any of it. I say that in my book. I'm like, no one needs crypto. You definitely don't. But it may make you some money. Appreciate the love coming through on the chat, guys. You guys are very welcome. Go get them. Hope it's helped. Yeah, but if you are interested and you want to do it, then you can do it in a way where it's not putting the rest of your wealth building at risk. And how you do that is you make sure that you've got some rock solid investments, a nice foundation of your wealth, and then you segregate and have a small portion of your wealth invested into the more speculative investments. That's how I've done my investing into. I've got some Bitcoin in my portfolio. I've got most of my investments are in really boring, long-term ETFs, index funds, and then I've got a small bit of Bitcoin over here. That I know if the Bitcoin goes to zero, like I'm going to be fine because I've got the other stuff in place. But if it's the other way, then it's a completely different game. So I hope that helps. Those platforms are all fine. The platforms charge the capital raisers as opposed to the investors. So no real issues on there. Would you recommending buying an investment property first or buying a house to live in, considering there are lots of government benefits for first home buyers? Look, I think it makes sense to leverage the first home buyer benefits as much as possible, but I actually just put out a piece on my TikTok. I got halfway through posting it on the other platforms, but basically the maths says that the sooner you buy your first home, the poorer you will be. And that goes against the conventional wisdom, but it's just maths. Because when you buy as an investment, you get the tax breaks that will mean that you've got more money left over that you can then invest to build your wealth faster. And that's why you'll be richer with an investment property compared to your own home. But you want to try and take advantage of the first home buyer benefits as much as you can. You need to run your numbers, though, to say, is it actually worth it in terms of how you do it? Also, does it change then the sort of property that you're going to buy? Because if it means that you're having to then choose a different type of property or a different location that's not as good an investment just so that you can live in it, just so that you can get the first home buyer benefits, then I would say that is probably not worth it. That's probably not a great idea. But if you can find a property that is a good investment, and you pick up the first home buyer benefits, you live in there for a short period of time, and you flip out, happy days. At what stage would you look at moving from shares to a more balanced portfolio? Well, it depends on what your position is, but as you're getting closer to the time that you want to live off the income from your investments, that's when you should be thinking about it. 7 to 10 years or within, if your investments is less than 10 years, then you should be thinking about it. But if you had $10 million, say, and I know that that's an extreme number, but if you had $10 million, you could be invested all in shares forever, and then that would give you your income, and you don't need any balanced portfolio whatsoever. So again, it depends on the numbers in your plan. Guys, I'm going to take 3 more questions. I'm going to choose these randomly because I can see there's heaps coming through. Hey, Ben, do you mind explaining? There's a question on there on offset. Watch the recording on that one, because I can see that there's so many questions here that I'm not going to get to. So I'm keen to cover one that I haven't already answered. Learning. My parents have a number of investment properties under their personal name. Their company has the income split between the two to maximize the tax benefits. In terms of tax and long-term benefits, should they move this to a trust earlier rather than passing it down via an inheritance, noting that they have one child who will inherit in their personal name and going to pass these on to assets to future generations? Learning, I would say that this is where you want to get some quality financial advice and some quality legal advice, because they have this thing called a testamentary trust. For anyone that's got parents that have money, you guys should definitely be across this and make sure that they are too. With a testamentary trust, basically a testamentary trust is a trust that's established on death. And say your parents have a whole bunch of assets, they pass away, everyone's sad. Then the money goes into the testamentary trust. You can then stream the income from those trusts to yourself. But also, if you've got kids, you can stream it to your kids, and your kids are taxed as adults. What that means is that kids can receive $20,000 every single year completely tax-free, which is minors are not allowed to receive investment. If minors start receiving investment income, they get taxed 45% up to 66%. So it's a much, much higher. It's like $10,000 per kid tax saving by doing that. Plus, they can do it to their kids, and you can bloodline the assets, asset protection, flexibility. If you were to move existing assets into a trust or company, you would be up for capital gains tax and transfer duties, which would be pretty significant. So good advice is going to pay for itself there. Learning, I would suggest definitely look into it. Hit us up if you want to push in the right direction on that one as well. Could you please share the presentation link? Yes, I'll do that. If I engage Pivot Wealth, do I work with you, or do you provide the advice? Do I see a different advisor? Yeah, I don't do one-on-one financial advice. I make myself available to all of our ongoing clients, but all of the clients of Pivot Wealth have another senior advisor in the business that is their key contact, just because my role is doing stuff like this as opposed to doing that. I just don't have the capacity. One more question, and guys, I appreciate all the enthusiasm, and nice to see so many people sticking around as well. Great work, team. What are your thoughts? Just trying to find a good one. Would you advise avoiding paying off mortgages and use that money for additional investments, for example, interest only instead of P&I? That's a really great question, particularly in the current environment. Look, I would advise, well, this is not financial advice and it's no sort of recommendation, but generally I would say that I would avoid paying down mortgages as much as possible. But if you're considering principal and interest mortgages versus interest-only mortgages, typically interest-only mortgages will have a slightly higher interest rate attached to them. So you need to look at it case by case, look at your income, look at the deductibility of the mortgage and say, is it worth paying the extra bit? Because I've seen it for some people, and it's like the cash flow with interest only will be $10,000 less. I'm trying to think. What I'm trying to say is that the actual after the tax benefits, if you've got principal and interest, it cannot be that much different, but you're actually paying down way more of the mortgage. Because if you're paying an extra 0.3 on your interest only mortgage, you actually, at some point, you're going to want to pay that mortgage down. So crunch the numbers, understand what the difference is, and then make the call from there. If you really stretch from a cash flow perspective, I don't have any issue with it, but if you want to optimize, then you want to run the numbers and actually optimize. Guys, I'll leave it there. Really appreciate all the questions. Great to see you guys. Stick around as well. Check out our upcoming events. We've got 3 coming up before the end of the year, and there's a heap coming on. There's a bunch of content on the Pivot Wealth website. And guys, we'll catch you next time. Bye for now. Peace. Appreciate the love. Thank you.